She served him like any other customer, but then she noticed the cards on the table. One simple suggestion from a young waitress would shock a billionaire, humiliate his friend, and set off a chain of events nobody in that restaurant could ever forget. Just as she whispered the winning move, the billionaire froze, and the entire room went silent. Everyone waited, holding their breath, not knowing what would happen next. Before we dive into the chaos that follows, I want to hear from you. Drop a comment below and tell me where you're watching from. I love seeing this story connect with people all over the world, and your hometown could be next. Arielle Monroe, 19, balanced a tray full of sparkling glasses with practiced ease, moving through the bustling tables of La Lumiere in Newark, New Jersey. She had lived in this apartment with her mother for as long as she could remember, a cramped space filled with warmth, laughter, and the constant hum of bills and worry. Her mother worked double shifts at the hospital, her hands rough from caring for strangers, her heart always soft for her daughter. Arielle had inherited her mother's resilience, but also a mind that raced faster than anyone could follow. Numbers, patterns, strategy games, these were her playgrounds. She could calculate odds, predict moves, and see sequences that most adults couldn't even imagine. But in the polished dining rooms of La Lumiere, her brilliance was invisible. Customers rarely looked her in the eye. Some spoke down to her, as though her uniform defined the limits of her mind. "Another water refill, miss?" a regular asked, his tone polite but condescending. She nodded, moving past him without complaint, hiding the frustration that burned quietly behind her calm. Even her coworkers often overlooked her skill, assuming that a quiet girl from Newark could do little more than serve tables. Yet in the corner of the kitchen, Arielle's mind never rested. She memorized card sequences, calculated probabilities, and imagined moves in games she wasn't allowed to play. That evening, as she carried a tray past a table near the window, she paused, overhearing the conversation of a wealthy guest. "I can't believe I lost that hand," he complained, tossing cards carelessly onto the table. A spark flickered in Arielle's mind. She leaned slightly closer, curiosity pricking her chest. Something told her she already knew the next move, and it would change everything. Arielle's heart raced as she stood just beyond the table, pretending to straighten napkins while her mind raced through the sequence of the card game before her. The man complaining, tall, impeccably dressed, with an air that screamed wealth, sat across from another equally polished figure, their laughter light but sharp with the arrogance of privilege. Adrian Cole. She didn't know his name yet, but she recognized him immediately from the way he commanded the table. Everything about him, his posture, the subtle grin, the casual confidence, shouted power. He leaned back, cards in hand, playing as if the world around him existed solely to entertain him. "Just a little luck," his friend said, smirking, but Adrian shook his head with amusement, his eyes scanning the cards. Arielle swallowed. Something inside her clicked. She could see the odds, the pattern of their previous moves, the tell of the next likely card. Her mouth opened almost without thinking. "You should play the queen next," she said softly, more a whisper than a command. The table fell silent. All eyes, Adrian's included, swung toward her. The restaurant staff froze mid-step. Even the diners nearby glanced up, sensing a disturbance in the usual order. Adrian's smile was slow, calculating. "Excuse me," he asked, amusement dancing in his voice. "You should play the queen," Arielle repeated, steadying her voice, trying to appear casual, though her pulse thundered. A brief pause. Then Adrian played the card exactly as she suggested, and won the hand. The table erupted into murmurs, not in celebration, but in disbelief. A waitress, a young girl from Newark, had just predicted a billionaire's next move. Adrian's gaze lingered on her, sharp and curious, the first spark of interest igniting. And at that moment, Arielle knew nothing in her life would ever be the same. Wow, can you believe what just happened? If Arielle surprised you as much as she did me, go ahead and hit that like button, subscribe so you don't miss what comes next, and share this story with someone who loves a twist of genius and drama. Trust me, you won't want to miss the ending of this story. The room seemed to freeze around Arielle, like someone had pressed pause on the entire restaurant. Marcus stared at her as if she had spoken in a foreign language. Adrian's eyebrows lifted, not in anger, but in surprise, almost amusement. No one expected a waitress to speak, let alone challenge a billionaire's game. Arielle felt her throat tighten. I'm sorry, she whispered quickly. I didn't mean to interrupt. Adrian leaned back in his chair, his eyes narrowing with a teasing smile. You think you see something we don't. His tone wasn't cruel, but it carried the weight of a man who lived above correction. She nodded, wishing she could disappear. It's just that card. If you play it now, it shifts the pattern. Marcus snorted. This should be good. Adrian shrugged and reached for the card Arielle pointed at, his movements slow and deliberate, as though he was testing her more than the game. He placed it down. The moment the card hit the table, Marcus's expression cracked. The sequence collapsed, the trap broke, and Adrian's hand suddenly became the winning position. Adrian looked from the cards to Arielle, his curiosity sharpening into something colder, more calculating. Well, he murmured, seems our waitress has sharper eyes than you, Marcus. Whispers rippled through the restaurant. A few customers leaned closer, pretending not to stare. Arielle caught her coworkers watching from the corner, their faces a mix of shock and fear, like she had stepped somewhere she wasn't supposed to. Adrian rested his elbows on the table, studying her the way some people study puzzles. Arielle, right? She nodded once. He smiled, slow and deliberate. Come to my mansion this Saturday. We host a weekly card night. I want to see what you can really do. Arielle felt her breath catch. The restaurant didn't feel silent. It felt dangerous. The moment Adrian's invitation left his mouth, the restaurant's energy twisted. Arielle felt eyes on her everywhere she moved, as if people were waiting for her to slip, waiting to see what a girl like her would do next. When she stepped into the staff area, her coworkers descended on her instantly. Tessa folded her arms. Please tell me you're not actually thinking about going to that mansion. Arielle hesitated. I don't know yet. A dishwasher snorted. Girl, he's not impressed. Men like him don't invite waitresses to be friendly. He probably wants to show you off, make a joke out of you in front of his fancy friends. Another server chimed in. Or humiliate you for entertainment. You saw how they laughed. Their voices formed a cloud around her. Warnings, fear, jealousy, concern. She couldn't tell which was which. But every word sank into her chest like tiny weights. They didn't know how long she'd spent being overlooked, talked over, underestimated. They didn't understand what it felt like to be seen for even a moment. When her shift ended, she walked home under streetlights that flickered like tired eyes. Her mother was sitting at the kitchen table, still wearing her nursing scrubs, exhaustion clinging to her like a second skin. Arielle explained everything. Adrian, the invitation, the stairs. Her mother's brow furrowed with worry. Baby, rich people play games with people like us. They smile at you today, then step on your neck tomorrow. You need to be careful. Arielle nodded, but something in her heart pulsed stubbornly. Just as she stood to put away her coat, her neighbor, Mrs. Harrington, visiting with a casserole, overheard part of the conversation. She chuckled lightly, the kind of laugh that hid more than it revealed. Well, she said, it's sweet you're excited, dear. But remember, girls from our background should know their place around powerful men. She smiled politely, but the message cut deep. Arielle swallowed the sting, her mother placing a protective hand on her arm. But instead of shrinking, something inside Arielle ignited, a quiet fire, small but fierce. All her life, people had told her what she couldn't do, where she couldn't go, who she couldn't become. She took a breath, steady and sure. I'm going, she whispered. And for the first time, the decision felt like hers alone. Saturday evening arrived wrapped in nerves. Arielle stood at the gates of Adrian Cole's mansion, staring up at a property that looked less like a home and more like a museum built for people who had never struggled a day in their lives. The driveway alone could fit her entire neighborhood. Lights glowed along the stone path, and fountains spilled water like liquid gold. Her hands trembled as she approached the door. She smoothed her simple black dress, clean, neat, but nowhere near the designer sparkle she knew waited inside. When the door opened, a butler gave her a quick, assessing glance, the kind people use to decide your worth in a single second. Inside, the house buzzed with laughter, expensive cologne, and the clinking of crystal glasses. The guests looked like they'd stepped out of a magazine. Tailored suits, glittering gowns, perfect hair, perfect smiles. But the moment Arielle stepped into the room, conversations dipped ever so slightly. Heads turned. Eyes swept down her outfit, pausing at her shoes, her hair, her skin. Whispers followed her like shadows. Who is she? Adrian invited a waitress? She must be here for entertainment. Arielle's throat tightened. Every instinct begged her to turn around and run, but she forced her shoulders back. She had survived harsher words, harder nights, deeper wounds. Still, the room felt heavy with judgment, and she felt small, outnumbered, exposed. As she stepped farther in, the crowd parted just enough for her to see a long table set up in the center of the room. Cards, chips, polished wood, velvet chairs, the kind of game setup only the extremely wealthy would call casual. Then Adrian appeared at the head of the table, dressed in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than everything she owned. His gaze swept the room before landing on her. His smile wasn't warm, it wasn't cruel. It was assessing. Arielle Monroe. He announced loudly enough for everyone to hear. Glad you made it. Dozens of eyes swung back to her. The air thickened. Adrian gestured to the empty seat beside him, the one usually reserved for his most important guest of the night. Come, he said. Sit at the table. Arielle's heartbeat thundered, and every whisper in the room sharpened at once. Arielle sat at the polished mahogany table, her heartbeat thundering louder than the murmurs around her. The chandelier above drenched everything in gold. Too bright, too sharp, too judgmental. Chips clacked, cards shuffled, and the air carried that silent pressure rich people breathed like oxygen. Adrian slid into the seat across from her, his expression unreadable. Ready? He asked, voice calm. But his eyes carried a strange mix. Curiosity, calculation, something she couldn't name. The first hand came. She studied her cards, ignoring the sneers disguised as smiles from the men around her. Then she played, clean, precise, bold. Chairs shifted, eyebrows lifted. By the third round, whispers replaced polite laughter. Who taught her that? One man muttered. She's guessing. Another insisted, right before she trapped him in a bluff so elegant even Adrian blinked. The irritation grew thick enough to taste. A few of the players hid their frustration behind tight grins. Others didn't bother. Arielle didn't look at them. She didn't need to. She felt it. Every drop of resentment aimed her way. But she kept playing. Adrian leaned back, studying her like a puzzle he wasn't sure whether to admire or fear. Every time she outplayed someone, his interest sharpened. Then came the final hand. The pot was high, everyone tense. Arielle counted breaths, counted risks, counted truths, and she struck. A flawless win. Cards flipped. Gasps followed. A couple of men cursed under their breath. Arielle sat still, pulse racing, as Adrian finally spoke. Impressive, very impressive. He wasn't smiling anymore. The air around the table had shifted. Where there had been polite curiosity, now there was tension, sharp enough to cut. One of the older men, a stockbroker with a permanent scowl, slammed his fist on the table. She's cheating. There's no way a waitress can play like this. His voice echoed, forcing heads to turn. Another guest laughed mockingly, swirling his glass. Or maybe she learned it from some boyfriend. That's how girls like her work. Watch, copy, and pretend it's skill. His words were coated with amusement, but the edge beneath them stung Arielle like a slap. Arielle clenched her hands beneath the table. Her knuckles whitened, but she stayed silent. She didn't need to explain herself. She knew the truth of her own mind, and that was stronger than their assumptions. Adrian, leaning back in his chair, raised one eyebrow. Now, he said, his tone calm but deliberately theatrical. Let's not get dramatic. She's sharp, yes, but it's all skill, gentlemen. He let the words hang there, watching their reactions. Arielle noticed a spark of amusement in his eyes, faint, almost hidden. He was defending her, but not fully. He liked the chaos, the whispers, the tension it created. The stockbroker's face reddened. He slammed his cards onto the table. This is ridiculous. I won't sit here being made a fool. He grabbed his coat, muttering threats under his breath. I'll make sure you regret this. He spat over his shoulder before storming out. The room fell into uneasy silence. Arielle's pulse pounded, but beneath the fear and tension, a tiny flame of defiance burned brighter. She had survived this far. She would survive tonight. After the game ended and the remaining guests drifted into scattered conversations, Adrian leaned back in his chair, his sharp eyes still fixed on Arielle. The golden light of the chandelier glinted off his watch as he gestured toward the side of the room, away from curious ears. Come with me, he said quietly. Arielle followed, her pulse racing. The warmth of the crowd faded, replaced by the hush of polished hallways and soft carpet that swallowed their footsteps. Adrian stopped near a grand staircase, looking down at her with an unreadable expression. "You've got a talent most people spend decades trying to find," he began, voice calm but deliberate. "I want to put that talent to work. Not for cards, not just for fun, but in business. I want you as my strategy consultant." Arielle froze, processing the weight of his words. A part of her heart leapt. Finally, recognition, an opportunity to use her mind beyond a restaurant. But another part twisted with unease. The offer felt like a trap, like she was a pawn in a game bigger than she could see. "What would that mean?" she asked cautiously. "You'd advise me, help me make decisions, spot patterns others miss. You'd sit at tables where deals are made and fortunes are won. People would listen to you, if you want them to," he said, with a faint smirk. Arielle hesitated, feeling the pull between ambition and caution. The thought of being used for someone else's gain pressed on her chest. But the chance to step beyond her life, to prove herself in a world that had ignored her, was too tempting. She took a deep breath. "I'll do it," she whispered, voice steady. Adrian's lips curved into a slow, unreadable smile. And in that moment, Arielle didn't yet know whether she had stepped forward or into a cage. The next week, Arielle found herself moving through sleek office towers she had only ever seen from the street. Adrian walked beside her like a proud general, introducing her to executives with a flourish that made her stomach twist. "This is Arielle Monroe," he would say, voice carrying across boardrooms, "my new secret weapon." Some faces lit with polite interest. Others, however, contorted with thinly veiled disdain. Arielle noticed how a few executives shifted uncomfortably when she spoke, glanced at her clothes, her skin, her age. She felt the weight of every judgmental thought aimed at her, like invisible arrows she couldn't dodge. During strategy sessions, Adrian leaned back in his chair, watching her carefully as she spoke. Her observations cut through numbers and projections, her calculations revealing patterns even seasoned executives overlooked. Some of them muttered about her background, her youth, her being just a waitress, though she kept her composure, masking the anger that coiled tight in her chest. Arielle couldn't deny a part of herself enjoyed the attention, the sense of being valued, being noticed. But another part bristled at the realization. Adrian was using her brilliance as a spectacle, a weapon, a trophy. She was both elevated and trapped, admired and objectified in the same breath. Late one afternoon, while Adrian spoke with two executives behind closed doors, Arielle lingered near the doorway, pretending to review her notes. Words drifted to her in hushed tones. "The test. We need to see if she can handle the pressure before the main presentation." Her stomach sank. A test. She hadn't agreed to be a guinea pig. And yet, she felt the familiar flicker of determination ignite. If they wanted to test her, she would show them exactly who she was. But the thought carried a dark edge. Something more dangerous was coming. Arielle arrived at the gleaming conference room, her polished shoes clicking against the marble floor. The air smelled of expensive coffee and ambition, and she could feel the tension radiating from the executives seated around the table. Today was supposed to be her moment, to shine, to prove herself, to show that she belonged at Adrian's side. But as soon as she entered, the atmosphere shifted. Whispers darted through the room like shadows. One executive, a sharply dressed man with a permanent scowl, muttered under his breath, "Wait till they see what a waitress girl is capable of, or not capable of." Another executive exchanged a glance and smiled, cold and calculating. Arielle felt their eyes on her, dissecting, doubting, assuming she would fail. They had prepared the data, rigged the presentation, and manipulated the numbers so that any move she made could be twisted into a mistake. They didn't see her as a strategist. They saw her as a spectacle, a tool for their amusement, and a lesson in humility they intended to deliver. Adrian stood at the head of the table, his expression neutral, almost casual. He didn't intervene. His silence was deafening, a quiet acknowledgement that he would watch, curious, but unmoved. He wanted to see what she could do, but not to protect her. Arielle swallowed hard, the weight of betrayal pressing against her chest. Her hands trembled slightly as she stepped toward the center of the room, notes in hand. Every instinct screamed that something was wrong. She opened the presentation, ready to speak. And in that moment, she realized the game had already been rigged. Every number, every slide, every chart was designed to make her fail, and she was walking straight into it. Arielle stood at the head of the conference table, her palms brushing against the cool edge of the podium. The executives leaned back in their chairs, faces twisted with smug anticipation. One of them, a tall man with slicked-back hair, cleared his throat. "Miss Monroe," he said, voice dripping with false politeness. "Perhaps you could explain these numbers to us. They seem confusing." She glanced at the data. It was rigged, tables that didn't add up, charts manipulated to mislead, projections designed to fail no matter what strategy she suggested. Her stomach tightened, but she forced herself to breathe, to steady her hands. Every eye in the room was on her, waiting for a stumble. Adrian remained silent at the head of the table, watching with his signature calm. His presence was a reminder that her performance was both expected and scrutinized. He wasn't helping her. He was observing, judging, testing. The tall man smirked. "We wouldn't expect someone from your background to handle high-level strategy. Surely this is above your experience." Arielle's chest tightened, a mix of fury and hurt coursing through her. The humiliation they intended to inflict only fueled her focus. She scanned the numbers, identified the manipulations, and traced every inconsistency with a precision that stunned even herself. Then, with steady confidence, she began explaining the errors. She revealed the manipulated data, reconstructed the correct projections, and outlined a flawless strategy that exposed the executive's attempts to sabotage her. Gasps echoed around the room. Faces that had sneered moments ago now paled in shock. Adrian leaned back, watching intently, a faint smile tugging at his lips. And Arielle realized something. She hadn't just survived their trap. She had outsmarted it. The room was in chaos. Executives whispered frantically to each other, their confident facades crumbling. Every attempt to discredit Arielle had backfired. The numbers she had corrected, the patterns she had exposed, left them scrambling to save face as their own incompetence became painfully obvious. Adrian leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled, eyes locked on Arielle. "Impressive," he said softly, voice carrying just enough for the room to hear. "Remarkable, really." His praise should have felt validating, but there was a tension behind it, a calculation Arielle couldn't yet place. She noticed the subtle narrowing of his eyes, the way he watched her as if studying her every move, not as a partner, but as a variable in a game only he understood. Still, the room had shifted. Where once she had been doubted, dismissed, underestimated, now they were forced to recognize her ability. Even the harshest skeptics couldn't deny the results. Arielle felt a surge of empowerment, a fierce, intoxicating clarity. She had outplayed them. She had turned humiliation into triumph. By the next morning, the story had leaked. The media picked up on her sudden rise from waitress to business strategist in Adrian's empire. Headlines buzzed across online platforms, newspapers, and social media. Some were flattering, some were skeptical, but all noticed her. One particularly viral article labeled her boldly, "Adrian's genius pet, the waitress who outsmarted billionaires." The words stung more than they celebrated. To the world, she was an accessory, a curiosity, a prize, but not yet a person fully recognized for her own talent. Arielle read the article, jaw tight, stomach twisting, and realized that the real challenge had only just begun. By evening, Arielle's phone buzzed relentlessly. Notifications from social media, news outlets, and message boards screamed at her with a mix of fascination and venom. The praise she had hoped for was drowned beneath a tide of racist comments, cruel memes, and snide messages about her background. "Waitress thinks she's smart," one read. "She's just a novelty, not a strategist." Others were sharper, more personal, attacking her skin, her family, her very presence at Adrian's table. Her hands shook as she scrolled, eyes stinging with tears. The empowerment from yesterday felt distant, almost hollow. For the first time, Arielle felt the weight of being seen, and not for who she truly was, but as a spectacle. The isolation of fame and brilliance collided with the vulnerability of youth, and she felt herself crumple. Her mother, sensing the storm from the other room, found her curled on the couch, phone in hand, tears spilling freely. She knelt beside Arielle, wrapping her arms around her daughter. "Baby, you're more than what anyone says online. More than what anyone believes. Don't let them take your heart, she whispered, brushing Arielle's hair from her face. Arielle nodded against her mother's shoulder, but doubt lingered. Adrian's praise yesterday felt different now. Was he genuinely impressed, or was he enjoying the chaos, the way the world reacted to her? The thought twisted in her chest, unbidden. Then, as she wiped her tears and reached for her phone again, a new message appeared. No name, no sender, just 4 words that made her stomach drop. Leave Adrian now. Her pulse raced, and a cold knot of fear settled in her chest. Arielle couldn't shake the warning. Sleep eluded her, and every conversation, every glance from Adrian replayed in her mind with a sharpened edge. She needed answers. She started quietly, searching online, piecing together reports, interviews, and business articles about Adrian Cole. What she found was unsettling. Stories of brilliant assistants, consultants, and prodigies, people who had risen quickly under his tutelage, then vanished from the public eye, their careers quietly sabotaged, their reputations used as stepping stones for Adrian's empire. Patterns emerged: praise, elevation, subtle manipulation, and eventual collapse. Her chest tightened. Each article, each whispered rumor, added weight to the suspicion growing in her mind. Adrian's charm, his praise, his careful encouragement, it wasn't mentorship. It was strategy. People weren't stepping up, they were being tested, molded, then discarded once they served their purpose. Arielle realized with a sinking feeling that she might be next. The invitation to the mansion, the praise in meetings, the way he paraded her brilliance, it had all been part of a larger design, a game she hadn't agreed to play. Her determination hardened. She would not be used, not without understanding the rules of this dangerous game. Later that evening, alone in the mansion study while Adrian was elsewhere, she explored the network he allowed her access to. Her pulse quickened when a folder popped up in his private server, labeled simply with her name, Arielle Monroe. Her hands trembled as she clicked it open. Files, photographs, surveillance notes, behavioral analyses, all documenting her every move since the first night at La Lumiere. Every step she had taken, every choice she made, Adrian had been watching. And now, she knew the depth of the trap she had walked into. Arielle's hands shook as she scrolled through the folder. Each click revealed more than she wanted to see. Photographs taken without her knowledge, personal documents, emails, and notes cataloging every move she had made since Adrian first noticed her at La Lumiere. His handwriting filled digital pages with observations about her reactions, her moods, her intelligence, her decisions, everything analyzed, categorized, and filed like a laboratory subject. She dropped to her knees, the screen's glow harsh against her face. Rage surged first, hot, fierce, a wildfire she could barely contain. How dare he? Every calculated glance, every praise, now felt like manipulation. Then heartbreak followed, searing through her chest. The man who had smiled at her brilliance, who had elevated her in front of the world, had only ever seen her as a tool, a game piece in a world she didn't belong to. Her vision blurred, and she clenched her fists. The betrayal was total, suffocating. She had been proud of her skill, proud of her rise, and now it was twisted into a cage designed by Adrian's cunning mind. She slammed the laptop shut, but the weight of the discovery pinned her in place. She could hear footsteps echoing in the hallway before Adrian's voice cut through the silence. Curious, aren't we? His tone was calm, unnervingly measured. Arielle froze, the laptop still in her lap. She had been caught red-handed, holding the evidence of his meticulous scrutiny. Adrian's eyes met hers, cold and sharp, and in that instant, she knew she had crossed a line she couldn't take back. The trap wasn't just set. She was standing right inside it. Arielle rose to her feet, chest tight, hands trembling with a mixture of anger and disbelief. "Why?" she demanded, voice shaking but strong. "Why have you been watching me like I'm some kind of experiment?" All of it, every compliment, every opportunity, was a lie. Adrian leaned casually against the doorway, arms crossed, eyes cold but calm. "It's not personal, Arielle," he said smoothly. "This is business. Strategy. Efficiency. You were good, and I needed results. That's all." Her hands clenched into fists at her sides. "Not personal. You've been cataloging my life, invading my privacy, manipulating my career, and that's not personal." Her voice rose, echoing through the grand study. Adrian tilted his head slightly, the faintest hint of a smile touching his lips. You should be grateful. You owe your rise entirely to me. Without my guidance, your brilliance would have remained invisible, unnoticed, wasted. Arielle felt fury and humiliation clash violently inside her. His words were venom wrapped in silk. The man she had once trusted, who had elevated her publicly, now revealed himself as the architect of her anxiety, her exposure, her exploitation. I don't owe you anything, she spat. I don't want your guidance. I don't want your empire. I'm done. Adrian's expression darkened, the calm giving way to an icy edge. Done, he repeated slowly. Be careful, Arielle. Walk away now, and I will make sure the world remembers your name, only as someone who failed. I'll bury you, and no one will lift a finger. Her jaw tightened, a spark of defiance igniting. She turned toward the door, heart pounding, fully aware that leaving him now would be the beginning of a war. Arielle didn't sleep that night. Fear and anger wrestled in her chest, but one thought cut through the chaos. She wouldn't let him control her. By morning, she pulled out her phone and called Malik, a lawyer friend from her neighborhood who had always believed in her intelligence and integrity. Malik, she said, voice steady despite the tremor underneath, I need your help. It's Adrian Cole. He's been using me, spying on me, manipulating me, and now I need to fight back. There was a pause on the other end, then Malik's voice, firm, supportive, unwavering. Send me everything. Emails, files, anything you've got. We'll build a case. You're not alone in this, Arielle. Over the next few days, they worked tirelessly. Arielle recounted every interaction, every moment of manipulation, every email and file she had uncovered. Malik advised her, strategized, and documented. Together, they began piecing together the evidence of Adrian's unethical practices, his exploitation of talent, his manipulation of employees, and the ways he hid it all behind charm and wealth. With every document uploaded, every note written, Arielle felt the weight of fear lift slightly. She was no longer the frightened young woman navigating a world that wanted to use her. She was a strategist in her own right, reclaiming control, turning the tables on the man who thought he could manipulate her like a pawn. Her confidence returned in waves, each thought a spark of defiance, each plan a step toward freedom. But as she reviewed the latest draft of their complaint, her phone buzzed with a notification from Adrian's law team. He had filed first, and the battle had officially begun. The next morning, Arielle's phone buzzed with an encrypted message from an unknown number. Her pulse quickened as she opened it. The message was simple. I work inside Cole Enterprises. I've seen everything. You're not alone. I can help. Attached were files, internal emails, memos, and recordings documenting Adrian's exploitation of employees, his manipulations, and his racist hiring practices. Arielle read through them in disbelief. Each document validated everything she had feared, but also gave her a weapon she had never imagined having. She immediately contacted Malik, who began coordinating with the whistleblower to verify the materials. Within hours, Arielle and Malik released the evidence to a trusted media outlet. The reaction was immediate and explosive. Headlines screamed accusations of discrimination, abuse, and manipulation. Social media erupted with outrage, calls for investigations, and widespread condemnation of Adrian Cole. The same man who had paraded her brilliance as a tool of spectacle was now under scrutiny for everything he had hidden behind wealth and charm. Executives who had once laughed at Arielle now grew nervous, distancing themselves from Adrian as the story spread. His carefully curated empire began to shake. Adrian, who had always controlled the narrative, found himself on the defensive. Calls, emails, and messages flooded him, journalists, authorities, and even investors demanding answers. By evening, the tension reached a fever pitch. Adrian's eyes darted nervously at his aides, voice tense as he barked orders. We need to leave. Pack everything. We're getting out before this blows up further. But it was too late. The world was watching. And Adrian Cole, the untouchable billionaire, realized for the first time that he might not escape the consequences. The courtroom lights were bright, almost too bright, reflecting off polished wood and the sea of suits and cameras capturing every moment. Arielle stepped forward, calm, composed, her notes in hand. The room, once buzzing with chatter, fell silent as she approached the stand. All eyes were on her, not with skepticism this time, but with expectation. Adrian sat at the defendant's table, his face tight, jaw clenched, a mask of arrogance beginning to crack. He had controlled rooms like this before, bent narratives, silenced voices. But this time, he faced the one person he had underestimated. Arielle spoke slowly, deliberately, her voice steady and clear. She recounted the manipulations, the surveillance, the calculated exploitation of talent, and the racist practices he had hidden behind wealth and charm. Each word landed like a hammer on the courtroom walls. Exhibits were presented, files, emails, recordings, all tying him to his schemes. The executives who had once mocked her sat stiffly, forced to nod in acknowledgement as the truth unfolded. The audience leaned forward. Even the media, trained to sensationalize, went silent in awe of her poise and clarity. By the time she finished, the courtroom was still, the impact of her words hanging in the air like smoke after a fire. Adrian opened his mouth to argue, to manipulate, but the evidence, her testimony, and the witnesses were overwhelming. The judge's gavel came down, sharp and final. Adrian Cole is found guilty on all counts. Arielle felt a strange mixture of triumph and relief wash over her. The man who had tried to cage her brilliance, to control her life, had finally been stopped. And she had done it, not with wealth, not with power, but with truth. Arielle stood in the sunlight streaming through the windows of La Lumiere, the place where it had all begun. The familiar clatter of plates and murmur of conversations no longer carried the weight of judgment. They were now the soundtrack to her own achievement. She ran her fingers over the polished counter, once a symbol of servitude, now a symbol of her reclamation. The restaurant was hers. She had purchased it with the first profits of her foundation, an initiative dedicated to supporting young minority students with hidden talent, those who, like her, had been overlooked, underestimated, and silenced. Scholarships, mentorship programs, and opportunities to develop gifts in science, strategy, and the arts filled the mission. She walked through the dining room, smiling at young servers and interns, encouraging them to pursue their ideas, their brilliance, without fear. Their eyes reflected hope, the same hope that had once flickered in her chest when she first dared to speak at Adrian's table. Later, she looked out over the city skyline from the rooftop garden she had built above the restaurant, breathing in the crisp evening air. Every struggle, every betrayal, every challenge that had threatened to break her felt like a necessary note in the symphony of her journey. Arielle whispered to herself, softly, almost in awe. I rose. Not because someone handed me a chance. Not because a billionaire saw me. I rose because I refused to stay down. And in that moment, the city below seemed to shine brighter, as if acknowledging her victory. She was never the girl who rose because of a billionaire. She was the girl who rose despite one. If Arielle's journey inspired you, hit that like button, subscribe for more stories of courage and resilience, and share in the comments how you faced challenges and rose above them. Your story matters too. Let's celebrate strength together.